I never thought I'd come home from a 2-week work trip to find my backyard turned into a wedding venue without my permission. But that's exactly what happened. I pulled around the corner, exhausted and ready to collapse in my own house, only to see industrial tent stakes driven straight through my grandfather's prize-winning rose garden. 3 generator trucks were rumbling in the driveway, filling the air with diesel fumes. A catering crew was unloading tables like they owned the place, and the metallic scrape of tent poles against my house siding made my stomach turn. The sweet smell of my trampled jasmine bushes mixed with the muddy tire tracks carved across my freshly seeded lawn. Then Karen Whitmore, our HOA president, strolled over with that smug little wave of hers and a stack of paperwork about some community use clause. I'm David Chon. 6 months earlier, I had inherited my grandfather's 1940s craftsman home in Willowbrook Estates. It wasn't just a house to me. It was where I spent every childhood summer learning to tend his legendary rose garden and listening to his stories about standing up to neighborhood bullies. I work as a freelance software consultant, mostly from home, and I had hoped the suburbs would be peaceful. I was wrong. Karen Whitmore had run the HOA unopposed for 8 years. Picture every stereotype of an entitled busybody and multiply it by 10. She drove a white BMW with HOA boss plates, was married to a city councilman, and had a special talent for selective rule enforcement. She'd find Mr. Patel, the elderly Indian man down the street, for his traditional brass peacocks that had been there for 15 years. She harassed the Johnston family, a young black couple, until they removed their kid's basketball hoop. My own introduction to her style came 2 weeks after I moved in. A violation notice because my mailbox was the wrong shade of white. When I questioned it, the fine doubled. From there, it only got worse. Grass too long at 3. 1 inches, Halloween decorations left up past November 1st. My work van giving the neighborhood a commercial appearance. Every time I pushed back, she found something new. Buried on page 47 of the HOA covenants was something called a community use clause, originally meant for emergencies or block parties with everyone's consent. Karen decided it gave her the right to use any yard for any community benefit event. Apparently her daughter Madison's wedding qualified, and she had already charged the future in-laws $8,000 as a venue fee, money that went straight into a secret special events fund that no one else knew existed. The next morning, a formal notice was taped to my door announcing the wedding for that Saturday. 200 guests, full reception, vendors already contracted. I called an emergency HOA meeting. The room was packed with Karen's loyal supporters. When I stood up with my property deed in hand and tried to explain that this was a misunderstanding, she barely looked up from her binder. "The covenant is clear, dear." After the meeting, Mrs. Rodriguez pulled me aside and whispered the truth. Karen had pocketed that $8,000. That night, I stayed up until 3 a.m. researching property law. What I learned was simple. HOAs cannot use emergency clauses for personal profit. When money is involved, the clause becomes legally void. I hired an attorney, Jake Morrison, who specializes in HOA disputes. He grinned when he heard the details. Karen just made a very expensive mistake. While Jake worked on the legal side, I ordered a title search. The results were shocking. My lot had never been legally incorporated into the HOA boundaries. A separate water easement from 1987 had excluded it from the original plat, and my grandfather had never signed the covenants. I wasn't even in the HOA. All those violation notices, all the threats, completely meaningless. Karen didn't take the news well. She sent a city inspector who was one of her golf buddies. He cited me for unpermitted modifications to a 30-year-old shed, foundation issues on steps that had been fined for decades, and threatened $2,500 in fines. She launched a rumor campaign, telling neighbors I was difficult and unstable. People started crossing the street to avoid me. Then she got desperate. She tried to block my mailbox, a federal offense. She organized a neighborhood safety patrol to watch my house. She even contacted one of my biggest clients and suggested I was mentally unreliable. That last move back, Karen responded by filing a restraining order claiming I had threatened violence. She scheduled the court date for the day before the wedding, hoping it would keep me off my own property. My security cameras proved otherwise. Clear footage of her shoving me and yelling while I stayed calm. We countersued for harassment and demanded her financial records. That's when the real bombshell dropped. The record showed Karen had embezzled over $45,000 from the HOA over 3 years. Hawaii trips charged as community research, her daughter's tuition as educational outreach, even a kitchen renovation billed to the HOA. When a neighborhood found out, her support evaporated overnight. But Karen wasn't finished. She vandalized my garage door at 2 a.m., spray painting community destroyer. My cameras caught her in the act. She tried to bribe the city inspector. She spread even wilder rumors. And then we discovered her husband, the councilman, had been steering city contracts to the very vendors she hired for the wedding, with the $8,000 venue fee laundered through city accounts as kickbacks. The FBI was already investigating him, and my evidence became the missing piece. Federal agents showed up. Local media turned the story into front-page news. Madison's future in-laws, a wealthy family, were horrified and threatened to cancel the wedding rather than be linked to a corruption scandal. I could have let it all collapse on Karen, but I kept remembering my grandfather's words. Justice isn't about punishment, it's about protection and healing. So I offered a settlement. Karen could use my backyard for the wedding, but only if she issued a public apology to every victim, made full financial restitution, resigned immediately from the HOA, and accepted a 5-year ban from any leadership role. In exchange, the wedding would go forward, and any leftover proceeds would fund a new community garden on land I would donate. To make sure she understood I was serious, my cousin parked a Bulldozer 2 blocks away, its engine rumbling loud enough for everyone to hear. If she violated any term, the unauthorized structures would be cleared immediately. Karen tried everything in the final days, cutting my utilities, slashing my tires, bribing me with $25,000 cash, even attempting to have me psychiatrically committed. Every move was caught on camera or recorded. Her own daughter finally turned on her, begging her to sign. On Saturday afternoon, with 200 wedding guests watching, reporters filming, and the Bulldozer idling nearby, Karen stood there directing vendors like nothing was wrong. When I arrived with my attorney, she tried to have me arrested for trespassing on my own property. The police officer simply said, "Ma'am, he owns this property." Jake read the settlement terms aloud. 30 minutes to sign, or the Bulldozer would roll in. Madison, in tears, physically put the pen in her mother's hand. "Sign it, Mom. Please." Karen finally broke. She signed the document, agreeing to everything. Karen completed her court-ordered community service and paid full restitution. The federal charges were reduced after she cooperated in the larger investigation. Madison's marriage is strong, and she is slowly rebuilding her relationship with her mother. Every morning when I walk through the rose garden, the sweet fragrance reminds me that justice, like gardening, takes patience and persistence. Beautiful things really can grow from difficult soil. Our neighborhood now holds monthly community meetings where everyone's voice is heard. Differences are celebrated instead of punished. Leadership serves instead of exploits. If you're dealing with an HOA bully, document everything, know your rights, and never